Ma'am, can you step away from the vehicle for a moment?
Sorry, what's going on? I'm heading to work.
Just keep your hands visible for me.
I have my ID right here if you need it.
That's fine. Just hold on a second.
I'm a nurse. I can show you everything. No problem.
All right, let's have you sit in the vehicle while we sort this out.
Wait, why? I didn't do anything.
Just sit tight for a moment, okay?
I have my ID. It's in my pocket. You can check it.
Dispatch is still confirming.
Confirming what? I'm just trying to get to work.
Ma'am, just remain seated.
It was 6:45 a.m., and the streets were quiet except for the soft hum of cars rushing past. Lena Thompson, a nurse at a busy city hospital, was heading to work like she had every morning for the last 8 years. She had her badge clipped to her uniform, her ID tucked in her pocket, and her mind on the patients waiting for her. She never imagined today would turn into a nightmare. As she turned the corner onto her usual route, 2 black SUVs suddenly screeched to a halt beside her. Agents in dark jackets jumped out, their hands moving fast, almost like they had been waiting for her. "Miss Thompson, step out of the vehicle," one shouted. His voice was sharp, heavy with authority. Lena froze. She had done nothing wrong. She fumbled for her ID, ready to show them. But the agents didn't wait. They grabbed her arms and pushed her against the hood of a car. "Where's your identification?" the taller agent barked. His eyes scanned her face with suspicion, as if her entire being was a crime. I have it right here," Lena stammered, reaching into her pocket. "Don't move," another agent snapped. His voice carried a sharp edge, tinged with accusation. "You think you can just lie to us?" Lena's heart pounded so fast she thought it might burst. The early morning sun reflected off the SUVs, glaring down at her like spotlights in a theater of punishment. She could barely catch her breath as the taller agent leaned closer. "Step aside," Lena pleaded. "I'm a nurse. I'm going to work. Please, just check my ID." The agent laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "You think your job makes you untouchable?" His tone was heavy, almost mocking. At that moment, a man in a black suit walked up, his badge visible on his chest. "Ice," he said simply, his eyes narrowing as he looked at her. Lena's stomach dropped. "Ice? Here? At this hour? On her way to the hospital?" Before she could say anything else, the agents forced her into one of these SUVs. She was shoved into the back seat, her hands pressed against the leather, the doors locking automatically. "Where are you taking me?" she yelled. "Somewhere safe." For questioning, the agent said without meeting her eyes. The ride was silent except for the low rumble of the engine. Lena tried to calm herself, tried to remember the breathing techniques she used after long night shifts, but nothing worked. Her mind was spinning, wondering why this was happening. She had lived in the U.S. for over 15 years, paid taxes, worked long hours, saved lives, and yet here she was, treated like a criminal without a second thought. After several minutes, the SUV stopped in front of a nondescript building. Lena's heart sank when she saw the tall concrete walls and the barbed wire above. "ICE Detention Center," the agent said, opening the door. "Step out." Her knees shook as she walked inside. The air smelled sterile, cold, and threatening. Agents stood around, watching her like a hawk. She was processed quickly: fingerprints, photographs, questions. But no one asked her for her ID. No one checked her documentation. They didn't even look at her badge. "Why am I here?" she demanded, her voice shaking with rage. "You will be held until we verify some information," a female agent said, her tone clipped. Her skin was darker than Lena's, but her words carried the same edge of authority, the same sense of "we decide your fate." Lena was left alone in a small room, the walls gray and unyielding. The clock ticked slowly. Every second felt like a hammer pounding in her chest. She thought about the patients she had promised she would see today, the surgeries, the IV lines she had to set, the elderly man who needed her to check his blood pressure. And here she was, trapped, unable to do any of it. She could hear other detainees shouting in the distance, voices angry, scared, pleading. Some words were harsh, some shouted in languages she didn't understand, but the fear was universal. She realized this wasn't just her story. This was happening to thousands of people every day, ordinary people, workers, parents, nurses, teachers. A knock at the door startled her. Lena Thompson. Yes, she said, rushing to the door. An agent entered, holding a folder. He looked over the papers without speaking, barely glancing at her. This is a mistake, Lena said, her voice rising. You haven't even checked my ID. I am a citizen. You'll have your chance to explain, the agent interrupted. His tone suggested he didn't care whether she was innocent or guilty. Lena sat back, her hands trembling. The folder slammed shut, the agent left, and the room fell silent again. Where are you watching this from right now? Take a moment to comment below. I want to know your city, your town, your street. And while you're here, please subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this story. It gets worse before it gets better. Because what happened next would shock her, shake her faith, and make her question everything she thought she knew about safety and justice in her own country. The room was small and suffocating. Lena sat on the metal bench, her uniform still crumpled from being pushed into the SUV. She tried to steady her breathing, but every sound, the distant clanging of metal doors, muffled shouting, footsteps, made her jump. She wasn't just scared, she was furious. A heavy door swung open, and two agents entered. One was tall, pale-skinned, with sharp eyes that seemed to pierce right through her. The other was shorter, darker, with a face she couldn't read, a mouth that barely moved when he spoke. Lena Thompson, the tall one said, flipping through a folder. Do you understand why you are here? I've told you already, this is a mistake. I am a U.S. citizen. I have documents, a badge. I work at a hospital. I save lives. Her voice cracked, but she held on to the words like a lifeline. The shorter agent smirked. Documents don't mean anything if we say you're under review. You know that, don't you? Lena felt a chill run down her spine. She had watched news stories, read online about ICE detaining people with papers, people who had lived here for years. But she never thought it could happen to her. Not like this. The tall agent leaned forward, voice low, almost whispering. You understand. Your kind don't always follow the rules, right? The words weren't subtle. Lena could feel the weight of them. Her race, her accent, her presence, being twisted into a crime before she even spoke. I don't know what you mean by my kind, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I'm a nurse. I work hard. I've never broken the law. The shorter agent laughed, sharp and biting. Oh, you think that matters here? We decide who is legal, who is illegal. And right now, you're illegal until proven otherwise. Lena's chest tightened. She wanted to scream, to fight, to make them see reason. But the metal walls, the cold floor, the heavy silence around her made every protest feel useless. You're being detained for verification, the tall agent continued. That means we can hold you as long as necessary. Do you understand? Yes, but I have patients waiting, Lena said, almost pleading. I work in the ICU. People's lives depend on me. Your job doesn't exempt you, the short agent interrupted. Everyone has a story. We hear 1,000 stories every day. His smirk turned into a sneer. Most of them aren't true. Time passed slowly. The room felt alive with quiet menace. Lena noticed a small crack in the corner of the wall, and she stared at it to distract herself. She thought about her mother who had worked 2 jobs to give her a life in this country. She thought about her younger brother who was in school across town, unaware of what was happening. And she thought about the patients she would not see today. Then the tall agent returned with a computer. We're going to verify some information, he said, setting it down. This might take hours or days. Don't expect to leave anytime soon. Hours passed. Agents came and went, each time asking questions that circled back to the same suspicion. Her background, her immigration status, her accent. None of them asked to see her ID. None of them checked her hospital credentials. At one point, the shorter agent leaned against the wall, arms crossed. It's funny, isn't it? You walk these streets every day, thinking you're safe. You go to work. You follow the rules. And then one day, someone decides, maybe you're not supposed to be here. Because of what? Lena asked, her voice trembling. My name? My face? The agent shrugged, his smirk widening. Something like that. The tall agent interrupted. Enough. Questions aren't answers. You're here until verification is complete. Until then, you stay in holding. Holding. That word felt heavier than chains. Lena was escorted to another small room, a space barely larger than a closet, with a thin cot and a metal sink. The door clanged shut behind her, and she was left alone. She sat on the cot, pressing her hands to her face. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, harsh and unforgiving. She thought about calling her supervisor, calling her family, calling anyone. But every number she dialed went unanswered, or worse, she was told to wait. Outside, she could hear the footsteps of other detainees. Some were yelling, some crying, some speaking in languages she didn't know. The voices carried anger, desperation, and fear, a chorus of people trapped in the same nightmare. Suddenly, the door opened and a new agent stepped inside. He was younger, with a faint trace of kindness in his eyes, but his uniform reminded her immediately of the power he held over her. "Thompson, we need to ask more questions," he said. "I've answered everything," she said, standing. "Please, just check my ID. You'll see I'm a citizen." He shook his head. "It's not that simple. You don't understand how this works. Until verification is complete, we hold you. You follow orders. That's all." Lena felt the sting of injustice sharper than any physical blow. She thought of the other nurses she had trained, the people she had helped, and she realized how fragile safety could be. One wrong turn, one misjudgment, and the life you built could be erased in an instant. Hours dragged on. Lena's stomach growled, but no food came. Her throat was dry, but no water was offered. She tried to stand, to stretch, to move, but every motion was monitored, every sound noted. By the time evening approached, her mind was frayed. Every shadow seemed to hide someone watching, every sound made her jump. She thought about giving up, about just letting them do whatever they wanted, but she couldn't, not after everything she had worked for. The day ended without answers, without ID checks, without mercy. She was left in her small gray cell, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant clamor of other detainees. The fear hadn't lessened. It had multiplied, grown into a quiet, pressing weight. And Lena realized with a cold certainty that her nightmare was only beginning. The next morning, Lena awoke to a harsh fluorescent light that made her eyes sting. The metal cot had done nothing to ease her aching back, and the sterile gray walls seemed to close in even more tightly than the night before. She shivered, not from cold, but from the knowledge that this was only the beginning. The door clanged open, and the tall agent from yesterday entered, flanked by two others she hadn't seen before. His eyes bored into hers, and there was a subtle smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Up," he ordered. "Time to talk." Lena stood slowly, every muscle stiff from hours on the hard cot. She could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. The two new agents were silent, watching her like predators waiting for prey. "You understand this isn't a suggestion," the tall one said. "Follow instructions, or there will be consequences." "I understand," Lena replied, though her voice was strained. "But I still don't understand why I'm here. I have papers, a badge. I work at a hospital. I save lives." "Do you know how often people like you lie?" the shorter agent asked, leaning against the wall. He was younger, with dark skin, but his words cut like knives. "People who come from your background think the rules don't apply to them. You think a badge gives you power? It doesn't. Not here." Lena felt her stomach twist. "What do you mean by my background? Are you saying this is about my race?" The agent's smirk widened. "Maybe, maybe not. The system isn't fair. But it isn't supposed to be fair. You're just here." For the next hour, they questioned her repeatedly. Every answer she gave was met with suspicion. Every explanation dismissed as a lie. They asked for details about her family, her address, her immigration history, even the hospital's phone number. Every answer was checked, double-checked, then scrutinized as if they were hunting for a reason to keep her detained. "You realize," the tall agent said finally, leaning close, "this could take weeks or months, and no one has to explain it to you." "I don't understand how this is legal," Lena said, anger rising despite her fear. "I am a U.S. citizen." The agent's eyes darkened. "Legal? You think that word means anything here? We define legality. You live under our rules now, not yours. That's the way it works. They left her alone again, but not for long. An hour later, another agent came, pushing a tray of food toward her. It was barely enough to fill a child's stomach. She ate quickly, hands trembling, her eyes scanning the small cell as if the walls themselves were closing in. While she ate, she heard voices outside, raised, angry. One shouted in Spanish, another in English. The tones carried frustration, fear, and anger. Lena realized she wasn't the only one being treated this way. Hundreds of others were trapped in this building, facing similar abuse, their voices muffled by bureaucracy and authority. By mid-afternoon, she was called again. This time, they brought in a computer and a printer. Papers were slid across the table. She glanced at them quickly, forms, requests, logs, but none of it pertained to verifying her ID. None of it checked her citizenship. You see, the tall agent said, almost conversationally, we don't have to prove anything to you. You have to prove it to us. Until then, you're uncertain. You exist in limbo. Lena clenched her fists. She had heard about stories like this, about people trapped in detention for weeks, months, sometimes years, while their lives were paused, stolen by bureaucracy and prejudice. She had never imagined it would happen to her. "Why are you doing this to me?" she asked. Her voice broke. "I've never broken the law. I go to work. I help people. I don't understand." The short agent stepped closer. "Because people like you forget where you came from. You think rules don't apply to your kind. You think you belong somewhere automatically. But you don't. Not until we say you do." It wasn't just her words that felt like punishment. It was the way they looked at her, as if her very existence was suspect. The unspoken racial undertones cut deeper than any physical restraint could. Hours passed in interrogation, then in silence. Lena was exhausted, her mind running through every possible explanation. Was this a mistake? A case of mistaken identity, or something darker? She remembered her coworkers, the patients, the people who relied on her every day, and realized that she was powerless to reach any of them now. By evening, she was returned to her small cell. She sat on the cot, rocking slightly, trying to quiet the fear that pressed against her chest. The walls seemed to hum with the tension of hundreds of others, trapped in the same cycle of intimidation and powerlessness. She thought about calling someone, anyone, but the phone was useless. No one could reach her here. And even if they could, there was no guarantee anyone would believe her. Her mind kept returning to one thought. This could have been anyone. Any nurse, any teacher, any worker heading to their job in the morning could be snatched without warning, pushed into a vehicle, and told that legality didn't matter. That alone was terrifying. As night fell, she lay on the cot, staring at the ceiling. The fear had not lessened. It had multiplied. She didn't know how long she would be here. She didn't know if she would see the hospital again, if she would see her family again. And then in the quiet, she realized something even more chilling. This wasn't about her at all. This was about control, about power, about the unspoken rules that allowed people in authority to treat others as less than human, and the world outside the walls didn't care. The night dragged on, filled with echoes from other cells, each voice a reminder of her isolation. And as Lena lay awake, she knew that tomorrow would bring more questioning, more threats, more fear, and that she would have to endure it all just to prove a simple fact, that she belonged in the country she had called home her entire life. But Lena wasn't ready to break. Not yet. The fourth morning arrived cold and gray. Lena hadn't slept properly. The cot was uncomfortable, and the constant fear made rest impossible. Her body ached, but her mind was sharper than ever. Today, she told herself, she wouldn't just endure, she would fight. The tall agent returned, flanked by two others. There was no warmth in his expression, only the same controlled authority, the same unyielding judgment. "Thompson," he said, his voice clipped. "Time for another session." "I want my ID checked today," Lena said firmly, rising from the cot. Her hands shook, but her voice didn't. "It proves I'm a citizen. It proves I belong here. Stop treating me like a criminal." The agents exchanged looks, the younger ones shifting uncomfortably, but the tall one's smirk remained. Documents? You think that will change anything? You exist under our authority now. Until we decide, nothing else matters. I've waited long enough, Lena said, her anger rising. I work at a hospital. Patients depend on me. You are destroying lives by keeping me here. The short agent stepped forward, leaning into her space. Lives don't matter when people like you break rules. You think because you help people, it gives you rights. His voice carried a subtle edge, heavy with unspoken judgment about her race and background. You don't get to decide that. Lena's hands trembled with rage. I'm not breaking rules. I am legal. I have ID. Check it. You are holding me without cause. The tall agent's expression darkened. You talk like you know power. But this is bigger than you. You aren't supposed to make the rules. You follow them, or you suffer. They escorted her to the processing room again. This time, the computer screen showed nothing but files labeled pending verification. The agents ignored her repeated requests to see her ID. Minutes stretched into hours. Lena began speaking more boldly. I have rights. I am not invisible. You cannot just erase me. I am a nurse. I save lives every day. Look at me. Do you see my badge? Do you see my ID? The shorter agent laughed, a harsh sound. You think your badge gives you value here? It doesn't. We decide who has value, who doesn't. And right now, you're nothing but a file on a screen. Her fury boiled over. She slammed her hands onto the table. Nothing but a file? I am a human being. I have lived here, worked here, contributed here. And you are treating me like a criminal without even checking my documents. The tall agent leaned in close, his face almost touching hers. And that is exactly why we do this. People like you are too confident, too sure of your place. We remind you where you really stand. At that moment, Lena realized something critical. They weren't interested in proof. They were interested in control, in fear, in dominance. She sat back, took a deep breath, and calmed herself. Fear could not rule her anymore. She needed to act. She reached into her bag and pulled out her hospital ID, holding it up for the agents to see. This proves who I am, she said, voice steady. Check it. Verify it. I am not your suspect. I am your citizen. I am a nurse. I save lives. For the first time, one of the younger agents, the one who had followed her silently before, hesitated. He glanced at the screen, then at her ID, then back at the tall agent. There was tension in the room, a crack in the system's armor. The tall agent's smirk faltered, though only slightly. Verification takes time, he said, trying to regain control. No, Lena shouted. Enough time has passed. You are holding me illegally. You are ignoring the proof in front of you. I demand you check it. The room fell silent. Even the short agent's sneer seemed uncertain. For the first time, the system that had dominated her felt human, flawed, and breakable. Minutes later, a phone rang in the room. One of the agents answered quickly, whispering urgently. Lena strained to hear, catching a few words. Hospital. Confirmed. ID valid. The tall agent's eyes narrowed, but he did not speak. He handed the phone back and motioned for her to wait. After what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke. Verification. Complete. You are legal. Citizen verified. Lena's knees almost buckled. She had expected this, yes, but the weight of fear, frustration, and exhaustion made the relief almost overwhelming. You're free to leave, he said, coldly, as if nothing had happened. Consider yourself warned. As she stepped out of the holding room, she felt the fluorescent lights burn less brightly. The walls seemed less threatening. Every step toward the exit felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. Outside, the city waited, indifferent but real. Once she was back in her car, she sank into the seat and exhaled. The world hadn't changed. The agents hadn't been punished. The system still held power, but she had survived. She had proven herself. On the drive to the hospital, she thought about the injustice she had faced, about the racial undertones, the intimidation, the sheer disregard for her life and livelihood. She thought about the thousands of people still inside detention, facing the same fear, the same humiliation, and she vowed that she would speak up. Her patients were waiting, her co-workers were waiting, and she was determined to continue her life, to fight not just for herself, but for everyone trapped in a system that often ignored humanity. That night, when she finally returned to her small apartment, she collapsed onto her bed. Exhausted, angry, yet alive. She stared at the ceiling, thinking of the agents, the files, the gray walls, and the endless hours of fear. She knew the world could be cruel and sometimes unfair, but she also knew this: she would not let it define her. And in that resolve, Lena found a spark, a fire that no unjust system, no heavy-handed authority, no racial prejudice could ever extinguish. She had been detained. She had been threatened. She had been treated like less than human, but she had walked out, whole, unbroken, and ready to reclaim her life.